Hi, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm here with my friend Maor, and he is a wonderful mastering engineer who has very kindly let us come over here and see his setup. Firstly, how are you? You good?
I'm doing good, yeah.
Good.
Great.
This is his own setup, and I've been to many mastering guys' places. I've been to the great Bob Ludwig we were just talking about, Ted Jensen and Steve Marcuson, and they all have wonderful gear. And this is as good a setup of equipment as I've seen at anybody's place, so this is pretty amazing. When I first walked in here, I think it was the first thing I said, I was like, wow, you have a lot of equipment. And for those of us that are purists and love this stuff, he has a lot of analog equipment. The great thing is he can show us the gear he uses and the kind of things that he does, because when we're talking about EQing and compression and limiting, we do all of that in mixing and recording and mastering, But the mastering engineer himself is, that is your forte.
Yeah.
You take, maybe I've recorded 10 songs in 3 different locations with different musicians and different rooms and stuff, and I've mixed it as much as I can to sound coherent. But what the job of a great mastering engineer is, is to take those 10 wildly recorded songs and make them feel consistent, so that when I sit there as a kid, or even now, put on a pair of headphones and listen, I've got some consistency and my head's not being blown up by something being super bright or super loud or too quiet or whatever. So that is the job of a great mastering engineer. Why don't you sort of tell us what you do, what you normally do when you listen to stuff? What's your process? How about that?
Okay. Well, first of all, when I work on a song or on an album, it's 2 different entities.
Right.
I think of them as the same but different, because one, as a single, you want to enhance it so it will sound great and translate the best on various playback systems.
Right.
Also, because the production, mixing, all that process, is done in one area or 2, but it's a certain mindset.
Right.
In mastering, you really want to take it to where the listener is.
Right.
And me being objective and fresh to the music, I kind of hear it like a listener.
Great.
I do have control and I can make adjustments, but I'm really objective about it. So I treat a single in a certain way, and then when it's in an album, then I have to take in consideration other songs.
Right.
So if I master like just a single, I'll put it, I'll give it the best to it without thinking of what's before and after, because it's just that song, that entity.
Right.
But when it's in an album, you have to think of what was the song before, what was the song after, how the other songs connect with.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So, it's a different approach, and sometimes you'll just do a single of the album, but with a different sound.
Right.
And sometimes, it will be taken out of the album of what you already worked on.
Right.
So that's why I like approaching it in a non-destructive way. So I can always go back and make fixes, revisions.
So you have like lots of different ways to EQ. So let's just say you put a song on and you make a decision and say, this EQ would be best for this. This EQ would be best for that.
Yeah, I agree. Most EQs, an EQ is an entity by itself. It's not just let's boost 1K or take down 1K. The whole system sounds in a way. Some EQs can be more exciting than others, even if it's the same frequency.
Right.
Like this one won't sound like this one, or like this one, or like this one, or this. Sounds so different. The gear itself, it's not just what you do with the gear, but the gear itself has a tone. Sometimes people say, oh, the mastering engineer said he didn't do anything. That's not true. He maybe didn't apply a lot, but just the fact that it was running through the gear, it affected the sound. Even if it's a short path, just the fact that it's running through that electronics, it affected the sound. And that's a decision that he made, by choosing to go through that EQ.
Especially with the transformers.
Transformers, yeah, or even without transformers, just the, if it's a tube EQ or solid state or, the op amps, every EQ topology is different. Even just the fact that you take a song from the playback system, could be a tape machine or just DAW, and running it through a mastering console, it affected it in a way. And you made the decision using that console, or you made the decision applying that EQ. All those things, they make the sound. in the end of the day. And,
Wonderful. Titan, I don't know this company.
okay, this is a mono unit, so I have two of them.
Right.
Titan, this is from Dave Hill Design.
Right.
And Dave Hill is Crane Song.
Oh,
So
right.
this is basically comes from the same company as Crane Song.
Right.
It's just a different line of designs he did.
I see.
And this is a compressor. It's a digital controlled analog compressor.
Interesting.
And you can change the values, and they don't. The numbers here don't relate to numbers that like milliseconds, but they're just basically for recall. And you just listen to it and see how the threshold and how the attack works and
Right.
release. Then you have the shape. It's kind of like the knee of it.
Right.
And then you have the gain, and here you have functions like the VCA color. You can make it sound more like an old Neve, like a 2254 style, or more modern compressors like a GML. Then here you have the parallel option, and here the dynamic color. It's how it
Right.
pulls up those transients, so you can actually
Sure.
compress and still feel that there's the transients.
Right.
Here it's like an EQ. You can do fat or air, and they're linked together.
This is 2500.
Yeah, it's a modified version of the 2500 compressor, which,
Right.
the unit itself has a color to it, has a sound. I like this unit. I modified it because I felt that I needed a change in the tone.
Right.
But I've done a lot of albums with the original version, and I've done with this.
Right.
I like this compressor. It doesn't fit everything,
Sure.
but it fits a lot of things that I like. This EQ is it's a BAX EQ, so it has filters, low cut and high cut, or
Right.
high pass and low pass, and then it's shelving
Right.
EQ. So you choose a frequency, and then you have the gains, either low end and high end.
Right.
This API 5500 is modified as well, so it doesn't sound like the original.
Right.
But it's an easy EQ to work with because it's it's selectable frequencies and dB.
Right.
This is an adaptive Q, so
Right.
you can't choose the Q, and the Q changes based on how you gain it up or down.
Right.
This EQ is very versatile. It can go from surgical to very broad strokes, and it's a fully parametric gain, frequency, and Q. And it has two types of Qs. It has a constant Q.
Right.
So the constant Q is basically the Q that you choose,
Right.
and it has an adaptive Q.
Right.
So it's a different type of Q in the Q that you choose.
Right.
And it has motors, as we saw, that I can, recall settings and move. And then see, the knobs will move, and the settings of which frequencies I use.
That's great.
The NSEQ4 is, it looks like the NSEQ2, but it doesn't have tubes in it. It's just pure solid state. And basically you have two frequencies you can do, shelving or bell, and these ones are just bells. It has a sound of its own. It's kind of an exciting sound. When you put it in, you feel like
Right.
something is getting pushed up nice.
Sure.
I like it very much. I think it has a really interesting sound, high end as well, very
Right.
nice. This section is a bit different. These are converters, D2A, A to D, and A to D. This is an EQ from Maselec. It's it's a parametric EQ, selectable Qs, and each one could be shelving actually or bell. Then selectable frequencies and cuts and boosts. You can go surgical, you can go wide with it. Very easy to use and recall. These are converters. This is a router, a digital router, where I can route the different converters and different gear. And it just basically input to output. It's like a matrix.
Right. Great.
So you can just connect which one you want, and you load up the presets. This is kind of like a Pultec EQ. It's a solid state Pultec by A Designs. Very clean sounding. It has a fat sound. I like it very much.
You know what? I'm glad you saw about this. I get asked a lot about how the boost and attenuation works on these.
Oh, well, it's not actually how it looks. That's
Yeah.
what's tricky about Pultecs.
Yeah.
Let's say you choose the low end. Let's say you're 30. Now, you can boost and you can attenuate. It's two bells that are close to each other, and then when you boost, you'll get a big bell, and then the attenuation is
Right.
in that area but it attenuates. So then the boost could be a bit cut, and then you create a shape. It's basically like two bells, one cut, one boost, one cut, and they're creating. Instead of a big bell, they're creating a small.
It's basically focusing it, taking the width of that boost and narrowing it.
Yeah. And not only that, it's also how they relate to each other.
Right.
And that's how you get that kind of sound.
Yeah.
And it's a passive EQ. It's a kind of more of an older design. So when you do low, boost, and attenuate, those three are working together. And then you have the bandwidth, and that's how much this section would, the upper section would work, if you have a low Q or a high Q, broad stroke. And then you choose here the frequency and you boost. Right. Now, this would work with this, and then this attenuation works with this one. So, this is what's tricky. The low end has the boost and attenuation on this section.
Yep.
The bandwidth, then there's the bandwidth, and then the boost here is on this one.
Right.
The attenuation is not on this. The attenuation is on this one.
Right.
So you can do, let's say, a boost in 10K, but attenuate in 20K.
Right.
So then you can taper off high end.
Right.
And still boost here. So when you look at it, it doesn't.
I get asked a lot, and I tried to explain it, but that was probably better than my explanation. Good.
Well, they have to try. The first time I worked on an old Pultex, I didn't get it because how it looks, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
This is the mastering console by Maselec, and it has an input section where you have gains, left and right. You can boost even more if you put it on. Then you have filters, high cut and low cut. This is the transfer section where you actually put the inserts in, and each insert is a different chain. And you can also put it in MS mode or flip between the units. Then you can do also parallel with this and make parallel compression. Then you got here the balancing between the mid and the side, the offset between them. This is that section. This is the section where you do the parallel. This is elliptical filter for the low end. You can put it in mono, so you can decide, I want everything from 80 hertz to be in mono, or up, or take it off. Here you can do the width. You can make it wider by percentages. This is the output section, the level. This is the monitor section where I monitor different inputs, and I can create offsets between them. And here's the cuts and dims and volume level. And if I want to listen to just the mono information, I can do that. If I want the stereo, which is the difference, just the size is the difference. And if I want the full stereo, I can listen to that too. Left and right means that I take the left information and put on both speakers, and right as well. So that way I'm actually listening to what's on that side and not just where it's positioned.
Nice.
And this is for the, which speaker I'm listening to.
Right.
This is the sources, and I can do inversing. This is the Rupert Neve Designs MBP.
Right.
Master bus processor. You can affect the tone with the texture and make it silk red or no silk or silk. Like silk red, silk blue, or not. And this is where you move the texture, like how much you want from it. You can change it there. You have a limiter as well. You could do blending, and that way it's a parallel compressor.
And what's this? This is a device?
Yeah, this is basically like a really surgical. Like you can go to cues that are unbelievable. I mean,
right.
You probably can see this thing on a plugin in terms of like how deep you can go.
Right.
Just because the graphic interface lets you in a plugin.
Right.
But and the ability, with the computer to go, but this is an actual hardware piece that can go, like, look, I can do notches.
Well,
so there's
the notch there. How tiny that is.
And of course you can make it bigger.
Right.
But yeah, this is kind of my surgical EQ. Every piece it's just it's a different sound.
Right.
Varimu has a certain sound. This was modified as well.
I like Verimus a lot. That's my favorite piece of Manley equipment. I like them on guitars because they soak up the top end really nicely. Like not, make it dark. They just take, if you got like a kind of a brittle electric guitar, just put a Variable Mu on it, barely move the meters, and like suddenly all that suddenly goes, it gets all nice and smooth. It's, they're like a poor man's Fairchild. They just kind of like smooth out the top end, because the guitar might be not too bright, it just sounds too brittle. And that, like you were saying, different pieces of equipment do different things.
Right. And you don't, like a Variable Mu, you don't need to compress in order to get the tone.
Exactly.
Because the tone is just there. I mean, you can just keep it on 0 and just running, by the transformers and the tubes, it will make the sound. You mentioned Fairchild, it's the same type of idea of the circuit, that makes that sound.
Yeah, I love it.
This is a bit of a different sound.
A dangerous one?
Yeah, this is kind of a more of it has a clean gain, so it doesn't have much of a tone. It doesn't impose a tone, but it has a clean gain, and I can use it for that. And
I see.
It's very fast and kind of it's easy to work on. I won't use this to compress really much. More just shave off certain edges, and also only if I can't get it with other stuff, I'll go to this one.
Tell me about the crane song, because I hear people talking very lyrically about that.
Well, this is it's a combined device. It's a converter.
Sure.
And then it's also a simulator of like tape and tubes. And since I have the I also use this as a converter. I've done a bunch of albums using this as a converter.
Right.
Nowadays I use these converters, but you can apply a bit of the syrupy feel of tape just by adding that or a
So do you use it with that other converter as well, just to get the tape, or?
Well, to get the tape I don't need, because this converter actually really sounds like tape. It has that kind of like the head bump feel, and it actually feels like a tape. So I don't need to simulate the tape feel with this. But sometimes I'll push the unit just to. It can glue certain things. Sometimes the low end could get glued a bit. It will push the low end nice.
Right.
Of course, all with moderation. You don't have to, go further with it. But it has the option to color the sound, and sometimes that coloration is exactly what I need.
Now the massive passive I see a lot.
Well, it's a very common EQ.
Yeah.
It's a tube EQ.
Are you using it much?
Depending, there's some projects that I used it. There's certain frequencies here that you can boost, and it will sound nice, not harsh. Like the high end of this is smooth. Where if I need to have more open high end, less smooth, I'll go to the other EQs. Both units, the Variable Mu and the massive passive, they have a tone.
Right.
It's not like an EQ that you'll use just to EQ, but it's also it has
has its own thing.
It has its own thing. For me, a project is a big picture. It's what it needs to get. If it needs more of that, I'll do it.
Right.
If the client, in the end of the day, I can put my stamp on it. Right. But in the end of the day, it's the client's project, and he has to live with it. And whatever decision he makes, for good and bad, he makes. Right. I can bring something to the table, but it's his decision to take what I brought or to alter what I brought in a good way or a bad way. So I just try to present what I can that I think sounds good. And like everything in life, every day you wake up differently, and you think differently. You might have the same mindset, but one day you're hearing, I want to hear more high end. The other day it's like, I want it warmer.
Yes, and I understand that. I have a tendency with mastering to choose the person to do the job and then let them do the job, because I'm boosting and cutting EQ all day on 50 different sources, but I'm not dealing with my master in that way. I'm not thinking in that way, and that to me, being as obsessive as I am about what I do for a living, this would be a whole nother thing for me. I would have to have a room like this just to be able to, you know what I mean? It's like, I can't then just put a plug in across the top. However, I do think for a lot of people, they'll be able to see what you're doing and apply some of that, because they probably don't, a lot of beginners don't have the budget to, spend on a mastering engineer. But at the same time, I think to understand the value of it is really important, you know, and they will aspire to, you know, having their stuff mastered.
These are PMC IB1s. They're passive speakers, 3 ways, and they have a filter that's connected to them behind the amp, which is called a film filter, or some call it Academy filters.
Right.
And that's in order to, it's simulating the screen on the speaker. The amp is a Bryston 4B SSD square.
Right.
And this version doesn't have pots or any of those in the back, so it's very clean. The other speakers, they're active speakers, so they have their own amp inside. Those are Neumann KH 310s. They're 3 ways.
Right.
And then there's the Reitones, which are simulating the Oratones.
Oratones, right.
The most important things in I think in audio is to figure out if you really need, you know, the decision.
Right.
Because applying more and more could work, but it could work against you.
Sure.
When I start mastering, I listen to the song, I audition different pieces of gear. Just because something costs 14 grand or something like that doesn't mean it has to be in the project.
Sure, I understand.
So I'll go in and out and figure out, wait a minute, this works, this doesn't work. I'll tweak it a bit, works, doesn't work, you know, I'll check it. Sometimes I'll work on a project, think I got to the point where I'm happy, and then I'll stop for 2 minutes, listen again, I'm like, nah, it's not good. Right. Even though I've added all this, and I'll go start from scratch.
Sure.
So same thing with plugins, you know, just because you have, you know, the emulation for the best thing since sliced bread, audition it. Do you like what it does, or just you get excited because you heard a change? The change doesn't mean it's always the right thing.
I understand.
So, and that's how I treat, and that's why I have a lot of gear, because I like auditioning and seeing what fits best.
Thank you ever so much for watching. Please, as ever, go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free stuff and competition details and files to download. Subscribe, and thank you again. I really appreciate it.
And if you want to check and read about the gear, on my website there's a list of even some of my gear that is floating gear that I can pull out. Just Maor Appelbaum.com, and there's a list there that you can look through.
Thank you. Thanks for watching.